in the last week, he said, don't come back without your younger brother. And, this was very hard for Jacob to allow, but they were starving. So they sent Benjamin along, which was Joseph's full brother. They are the two sons of Rachel. So they are Joseph's only full brother is Benjamin. So then he tests his brothers, and he gives them grain, and then he puts a silver cup in Benjamin's sack and sends them off, and then sends his guards after them and says, one of you stole something. And they come back and they discover the silver chalice, beautiful cup in Benjamin's bag of grain. And so Joseph is going to throw him in prison. And where we open up in this parsha is Judah begging that instead of taking Benjamin, he takes him. So I want to look at this, and then there's a lot of reverberations to the past. So let me just share. Hold on. Share screen. There it is. Share. It's Genesis chapter 44 if you have your own Chumash. And let's just read the first 3 verses, 18, 19, and 20, and stop there. So who would like to read? Somebody would like to read? Okay, Sue. Zinka. Samasima.
Okie. Chapter 18. Then Judah approached him and said, please, my lord, let now your servant speak something into my lord's ears, and let not your warmth be kindled against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh.
Okay, so Judah is referring to himself as a servant, and he's comparing Joseph to Pharaoh. So that's very interesting. Go on.
My lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother?
Okay, so now he's reviewing the past. This is what last time we were here, you asked us. We are his servants. It's interesting how in royalty, you speak in the third person. You're the servant, he's the Lord. You never say you, it's too familiar. It's too, you can't say that. So you talk in the third person. So when he says, my Lord asked his servants, he's saying you, my Lord asked us, his servants, have you a father or a brother? Okay, one more.
And we said to my Lord, we have an old father and a young child of his old age, and his brother is dead, and he is left alone of his mother, and his father loves him.
Okay, so what do you think that means? And his father loves him, as opposed to who? This is a commentary that's saying it's saying more than that. He's not just saying his father loves him. What else is he saying? As opposed to us. He loves him. He doesn't necessarily love us, is what they're saying. His father loves him. And they've always had this grievance. First he loved Joseph, and now he loves Benjamin, and he is left alone of his mother, and his father loves him. So there's
Is that because it's the children of Rebecca?
Rachel,
and not the other wives?
Well, possibly. But what's interesting is a commentary I read said that one of the hopes of the brothers was that once Joseph was gone, because we know how much he favored Joseph, he gave him that incredible multicolored tunic. In ancient time, colored clothes was a sign of royalty, a sign of, real reverence and esteem, because dye was expensive and dyeing clothing was and it was striped. It had multiple colors, truly like royalty. And most people wore the sort of drab, brown or burlap or maybe some beige or something, but to wear that. So we know that. And now he's saying they hoped once they got rid of Joseph, they would get some of their father's favor. But what do we learn from this? One line. He didn't work.
It went to Rachel's other child.
It went to his other child, and they never got what they hoped. And want to see more people. And what do you think that says about Jacob?
Not very, he wasn't a great parent.
No, Penina. You're muted. You're muted, Penina. Still muted. Yeah.
Okay, now
Yeah.
they're showing some compassion to this young brother because they say he's left alone of his mother. So they are kind of like excusing why Jacob is treasuring this young kid. They are acknowledging that he's an orphan of his mother.
Yes,
So
I
that
don't.
shows a little bit of a little bit more sensitivity on the brother's part, that they at least feel a little bit sorry for this kid because he doesn't have a mother.
Right, and she died in childbirth, so
Right.
he never had a mother.
Right.
So we
Right.
don't know much about Benjamin, but you know that's true. Okay, so then, but what we're knowing is our fathers, they're not, it's more like they've accepted it. This is like 24 years later or something. It's a long time. And yet you said to your servants, bring him down to me. And I said, well, my eyes. And we said, the boy cannot leave his father, for if he leaves his father, he will die. And you said, don't come down, blah, blah, blah. And my father said, okay. And he repeats the whole story, how Jacob said, I only have 2 children from Rachel. I already lost one. If you look at 29, if you take this 1, 2 away from me and misfortune befalls me, you will bring my hoary head in misery to the grave. So Jacob said, if anything happens to Benjamin, I'll die. You're going to kill me. So be very careful. And so now we come back to Judah. And Judah is saying, I want to move you over here.
Susan, can you enlarge it a bit?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'll start from here. Hold on. Now we're at, just so you know, 18. 18. Come on. Font, let me do you. 18. Okay. Is that bigger? Is that big enough?
No,
It's still not big enough?
could be bigger.
Okay, this is 18, just so you know. Hold on, I'll try to make it. I can make it bigger. Why not? Hold on, let me just. I'll make it 20. Well, let me know when it's big enough.
You're so proud of yourself that you can do this now.
Okay, how about this? Is
Better.
that big enough?
It's better.
That's good.
You want it bigger?
No, good. It's good.
That's good.
Okay. All right, let's go back. Oh, I didn't. His misery in the grave. Okay. Okay, so let's go to 31. And who would like to read? 31, because all of this was like repeat from the Parsha, last week's Parsha. 31, who would like
I'll
to?
read.
Okay, Stacy.
Okay. Oh, okay. It will come to pass when he sees that the boy is gone, he will die, and your servants will have brought down the hoary head of your servant, our father, in grief to the grave. For your servant assumed responsibility for the boy from
Okay,
my
so when he says for your servant, he means me.
Oh.
I assumed responsibility for the boy. Go ahead.
I assumed responsibility for the boy from my father, saying, if I do not bring him to you, I will have sinned against my father forever. So now please let your servant stay instead of the boy as a slave to my Lord, and may the boy go up with his brothers. For how will I go up to my father if the boy is not with me? Let me not see the misery that would befall my father.
Okay. So do we remember what participation Judah had in the downfall and the sending away of Joseph? What was Judah's part in it? Does anybody remember?
Was it not to throw him in the pit, but not to kill him or to
No,
sell
that
him?
was Reuben.
Reuben, I can't remember which one. Then was Judah the one that went away and was going to come back?
Well, they all went away, but
You know,
he was
one-
the one who said, let's sell him into slavery.
Okay,
So that was Judah. He was the one that sold him into slavery. So how has he changed over the years? And if you recall this, so this was an interesting commentary I read. I can't take credit for everything because I read a ton of things before I meet with you. So the question or the interesting thing to note is, what has Judah gone through since they sold Joseph until this moment?
he lost two sons.
He lost two sons. How?
Well, they don't say how they died. They married Tamar, and then
Right.
and then one died, and then the other one, because he was displeasing to God, and the other one spread his semen on the ground.
Okay, so if you don't remember, in between the story of Joseph, there's this whole interlude. Do you know it? Does people know it or not? Say yes or no, shake your head or say
Yes.
no.
No.
No, okay. Who said yes? Cindy, so why don't you tell us?
So, yeah, I have my notes on it, that, well, we are believed to be descendants of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, so he is pretty important, that his two sons die, and the widow is told, well, she marries the first one, he dies, she has to marry the second one, he dies, he has a much younger son, and Tamar said, well, she has to wait around till he's old enough for her to marry him so that Judah will have a blood relative. And she doesn't want to do that. So she
waits quite a while and nothing happens.
but she goes to the gates of the city and dresses as a prostitute. And Judah comes by and doesn't recognize her because I think she has a veil or something.
Right.
And they have sex. And he gives her some tokens afterwards.
He
And
gives
then
her, okay, so let me
she
just,
gets pregnant.
yeah, let me just stop you for a second, just to correct that one piece. That's correct. He says, he thinks she's one of these sacred prostitutes of the Canaanite women where they did have sex. It's called a kadesha from the word kadosh. They refer to her as a kadesha. And she says, well, what will you pay me with? And he's on his way to a big sheep shearing. He says, well, I'm going to a sheep shearing, but I'll give you my staff and my seal as collateral, and then I'll come back and redeem it with money. So your staff is, your symbol, and your seal is how you, sign documents. So it's pretty important. So she takes them, they have sex. He goes there, he comes back, and she's nowhere to be found. She's gone. She's disappeared. And they say, people say, what sacred prostitute? There was no one here. So then Cindy.
She gets pregnant.
Right.
And she goes to him and he denies it.
The elders come to Judah.
Okay, but Judah denies it, but then she has these two tokens that he gave her. And
okay, let me stop.
Okay, yeah, you can tell it better.
Okay, so that's not what happened. These elders come to Judah and say, there's a woman, it's your daughter-in-law, and she's pregnant and she should be burned. She should be burned. And they say, well, bring her to me. And then they grab her and she says, she doesn't say anything. She sends in the staff and the seal and says, tell him that this is the father of my child. And when he sees it, he realizes, oh my God, it was me. And he says, she is more righteous than I am because I owed her this husband, because she was, betrothed, and she was like an aguna. She couldn't marry anyone else. She was stuck at home in her parents' house. She had no status whatsoever, waiting to marry. So then she has two children, and one is Perez, and Perez actually is the ancestor of Boaz. Boaz is the man who marries Ruth, and Ruth and Boaz are the great grandparents of King David. Okay, who asked this question? Lisa, you had a question?
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hi.
Yeah.
How did she get the staff and the seal if he didn't come back and give it to her?
No, he gave it to her as collateral and said, I'll come back and give you money.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Here's my staff and seal as like and hold this, like and I'll go back up there, get the money, come back, and you'll give me my staff and seal. So
Okay.
he gave it to her.
But
So then
because he never came back, she still had it.
he did come back. She was gone.
Okay, but
She
she still,
disappeared. She
but
had
she
it.
never returned it to him.
She never returned it.
So
and
she had
so-
it as proof later on.
Right. So, okay. So all of this happened to Judah, which also makes us understand he was no longer a young man if he had grown sons who were married, and he went through this whole thing. So he's this middle-aged man now. And now he comes to Pharaoh, to Joseph, and says, take me instead of my brother as a slave. I can't face my father. Because we see he understands what it's like to lose beloved children. He only has one young son left himself. And so my question is, do you think you have to suffer or actually go through similar experiences to empathize or change? What do you think? Is that how far you need to go, Benjamin?
Well, I'd say yes and no, Rabbi, if I may, because
You may.
when and I apologize for being late, but the LADWP was here and I had to deal with that.
Okay.
When one has similar experiences in my lifetime, my experiences, I can empathize better with people that are going through something maybe not exactly the same, but akin to. If I've never had that experience, it's going to then be based on my emotional intelligence. How capable am I to feel what others feel, even if I've never had that experience?
Do you think that's why Judah spoke up and no other brother did? I mean, we really don't know what other brothers went through, but we know. Does anybody have any other comments on this idea that you have to actually, suffer or go through similar experience to empathize or understand? Sue.
I just want to say Judy Woodruff is retiring from PBS and she has a disabled son. And there have been several articles in the last couple of days mentioning that because she had a disabled son, she had a lot more sympathy for people who were dealing with that. And I think, as Benjamin said, absolutely, that's true. Some people may be able to empathize, but I think if you've had the experience, you walking in somebody else's shoes, and you certainly can feel more deeply what they're feeling.
Right. Susan?
Yes, I think when I was in psychology, a psych major, I think they emphasized, this was years ago, the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Mhm.
And empathy with the German school of psychology said it's feeling into or feeling with. So I think what Benjamin said was correct. If you had the experience, you can empathize. If you haven't, you try and deeply sympathize, and try but never can totally feel what that person is feeling.
Yeah, we see a lot of instances where politicians or people that are against things like homosexuality, and then they have a homosexual or lesbian or gender fluid child, and suddenly, they realize they see it differently. So yes, I think that's true. Okay, Donna?
Yeah, I really feel I can relate to this because I have a disability, and the bullying and not understanding. And so she's really mentally unstable. Then I start playing the piano. I go, man, that girl's brilliant. It's like, I just laugh about things.
But do you
because
think
I understand.
people have to go through something to understand it, or know someone to
It
understand?
depends. I think that's a really tough question because I've experienced from the temple so much love and understanding and everyone reaching out to me. I never had anyone be rude or mean or bully me at Wilshire Boulevard Temple. But uneducated people might not have as much empathy or sympathy. I mean, people that just aren't in touch with the emotions like y'all are. We're all emotionally connected. That's
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Lisa?
Yeah, I kind of see this a little bit differently because I also have a disability, and I have seen how some people are willing to, I think if you just say somebody has to go through something to really get it, I just think that's the easy way out,
Mm.
you know? And I think the concept that if you are friends with somebody or family with somebody and they have a chronic something, whatever it is, I think it's your, I can't remember, you know, it's more like, I believe you must try to understand and you don't get off the hook because you've never had it. Because, you know, the problem, especially with certain things, like if it's a mental disability, you know, that's too easy. Like just because you can't see a cast on somebody's leg doesn't mean they don't have a problem. And if you don't take it upon yourself to say, okay, no, I haven't experienced this, but maybe I'm going to get educated about it because somebody's in my family or somebody's a friend of mine. I just think that's just not the moral way to be. That's me. Having gone through when people won't learn about something and then they judge you, because if you get educated about the issue, you're far less likely to make these terrible judgments, which can really hurt the person much worse than the disability.
Mm.
Yes.
So I think, you know, no, it's not easy, but life is not easy and relationships are not easy. And we're not here for it to be, you know, I'm sorry, like you know, everything's, you know, as my father used to say, who's no longer here, he used to say, well, every day is not Yontif.
Right. But what I was asking, though, I agree with you, is it easier? And it's interesting that of all the brothers who speak up, it is the one who lost his sons as well, you know, and has learned that he doesn't know everything, how he misjudged Tamar, and he has gone through a lot. I have another question, because this is an interesting question. There's this, it's almost a cliche, or this saying that, you know, age brings wisdom. Aging brings wisdom. Do you agree with that? Do you think it brings wisdom?
Yes.
Okay, you do, Pnina. Why?
I'm going to get political now, and you're not going to like it,
Not
but
too political.
I can give you an example. You know, everybody's not happy that Benjamin Netanyahu was elected again. I always remember Antebia, when his brother went and lost his life, saving the people that was held hostages and taken from the airplane in France. And who is more to understand the position of the people of Israel and their fragility when they are out in the world or even in their own country than a person who lost his brother saving the lives of Jewish
Okay, but I'm asking,
hostages.
so you think
That's it. For me, that's enough. Enough.
Okay.
And I was very happy that he was chosen again, because I know that they felt it on their skin and in their home, and they know what it is and how fragile it is, the situation, and you have to be strong, and that's it.
Okay, so I'm really asking, though, less about, do you think in general age, do you think, I wonder if just because you get older, you get wiser. I mean, is there more to it? Stacy, what are you saying?
I don't think age is the determining factor. I mean, I think it's life experience. I think it's empathy. I think it's sympathy. I think it's, you know, your moral structure, your ethical structure. Age is, it's sort of a characteristic, but I don't think it really bestows any particular wisdom on you. I mean, I know a lot of people who are older people, and it's like, man, what if you know, what kind of life have you lived? Is it so, I wasn't going to say sheltered, but is it so myopic that you can't, you know, see things that I think as we get, you know, as we mature, I think are important to see.
The reason I ask is because, and we don't have to answer it right now, but has Jacob gotten any wiser? Has Jacob gotten any wiser? He's gone through a lot, and let's see if he's gotten any wiser. Because it's it's interesting, and it's kind of, there's you could go both ways with this. Okay, so let's continue. All right, so now we come to Joseph saying, oh my God.
I'll call you back.
Who would like to read?
I ate already. I'm good. I love
Okay,
it.
Panina, put yourself on mute. Okay.
Yeah.
Susan Ehrlich, why don't you read?
Sure. What line are we on?
We're on Genesis chapter 45.
There. Now Joseph could not bear all those standing beside him, and he called out, "Take everyone away from me." So no one stood with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers.
Okay, hold on. All right.
And he wept out loud. So the Egyptians heard, and the house of Pharaoh heard.
Wow, that must have been really loud. I never really noticed that sentence till just now. To cry to sob so loudly that they heard him through the doors. They heard him down the hall or whatever. Go ahead.
And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him because they were startled by his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come closer to me." And they drew closer. And he said, "I'm your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not be sad, and let it not trouble you that you sold me here, for it was to preserve the life that God sent me before you."
Okay, I want to ask you. Oh, okay, Lisa, you have a question? Oh, your little hand is up. Okay. I have a question. How far is it from Egypt? I thought about this. How far is it from Egypt to Canaan that all this time he never sent word that he was alive? Is my father still alive? It's like, couldn't you have found out in some way? So what do you think about that, Sue? I see you shaking your head, Sue Casa.
I was thinking the same thing. In other words, he's the assistant to Pharaoh, so he could send somebody to do this if he didn't want to do it himself. And yeah, what's with Joseph that he never wanted to find out if his father's still alive?
Any other thoughts about it? I didn't find any commentary about this, but
And I asked about writing. I write all the time, and writing is so important. It's like a little journal, and something for my children to keep. We think you will write, by horseback or camel, send a message.
exactly.
Send a message.
Or even if you wanted to know, send a spy down and just check it out or something. But he never let his father even know he was alive, that's kind of what is that, a flaw? Is that a selfishness?
But maybe if his brothers knew he was alive, they'd try to kill him again.
Do you think that was his fear? Maybe?
I don't know. I think he was protected enough that it's not true, but it could have been his fear.
Right. Any other thoughts, Susan?
Yes, I had read someplace that he had some resentment still, because his recognizing that his father's favoritism for him put him in this situation. And
Okay, but we're going to see him do the exact same thing in a minute.
okay, and so it's been ambivalent. He was concerned at this point. He may have been concerned before, but there's a little bit of why did he do this to have this happen to me? Although he eventually said it was God's plan. He was saying all along it's God's plan.
It's God's plan that he was sold to Egypt to, interpret the dream. But if my father's still alive, it's like, hello, and a Panina.
Yeah.
I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the situation here is a little bit what happened with Esther in Persia. Once he is a member of, I would say, Judah was the head of a tribe right now. And his father was the head of a tribe. It's like a head of a nation at the time.
Right.
And here is one of the children of these people in his position. Pharaoh would think that he probably would want to either fire him or maybe even kill him, because it's a matter of you are ahead of another nation and you're working for this guy. So right now you are underneath it, but when you know that who he is, it becomes a rival. And that's a different story. So I don't think he wanted to tell him ever who he was, because it would actually jeopardize his life.
But he did know he was a Hebrew, because they say there's this Hebrew down in the prison.
But he knew that he was the son of Jacob, and Jacob at the time
That's
was the head of a
interesting.
tribe.
I
There
like
was
that.
no other nation. Those were the nation.
I think that's very interesting. Okay, let's continue.
Susan, may I share something real quick? It's
Sure.
very interesting. I got a Christmas card from Joe and Jill, and they mentioned my family in the
Okay,
card.
it's not relevant. Not relevant.
I thought it was cool though.
Not relevant. Okay, all right. Okay, so he says, God sent me, blah, blah, blah. Hasten to go up to my father and say to him, so said your son Joseph, God made me a lord over all Egypt. Come down to me and do not tarry. Okay, so he says, go home and bring, my father immediately. And he says, okay, this is all like, I want to get to the point. And you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and you and your children and your grandchildren and your flocks. Okay, you're all moving up here, and I will sustain you there. I still 5 years of famine, so you won't, become poor and you won't starve. And behold, as your eyes see, as well as my brother Benjamin, this is my mouth speaking to you. So tell my father. And so then he hugs and kisses his brother Benjamin and all his brothers. And I want to get to the point. And the Pharaoh says, go. Everybody loves him. This is a great reunion. I'll give you the best of the land. So, and the sons did so. Okay. And then here, this is where I want to go. Pharaoh says, as just take yourself wagons from the land of Egypt for your children. I'm even going to provide transportation, carry your father, and don't let your eye be concerned about your utensils. You don't even have to bring, your pots, your pans, everything is yours. And sons of Israel did so. So interesting. And I can't figure out why. Sometimes it's called Israel. Oh, I did figure it out. When they refer to the sons of Israel in Hebrew, that's Bnei Israel. And so one of the commentaries said, now they're so large that they've become like a people, and they're called Bnei Israel. So when they were called Bnei Israel, we're talking about the whole clan, as opposed to Jacob is the individuals. Okay, now here it is. Who is saying this? Susan. Read this one, Susan Ehrlich. 22, you're muted.
He gave them all, to each one several changes of clothes, and to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothes. So there's a repetition.
He's learned nothing. He's learned nothing. These people. So it's the same thing as his father did. So it's really interesting. But what do you think the significance is of the clothes?
Clothes grant some stature. We talked about it with the colors and so on, but clothes can change you, alter something internally as well. And we know that people in the army feel differently when they put their uniforms on. School kids with uniforms know that they belong to that school. We saw a lot of pageantry in England recently with all the soldiers and so on, but they can do something internally as well as externally.
They signify this is now royalty or connected to royalty. However, isn't this the very thing that started the whole story? Right. The clothes he gave, he had the tunic. So there's
many colors.
That significance that he's giving them. I had one tunic, I'm giving you lots of beautiful clothes. So let's get past this. Of course, then he gave his brother 5 changes and money. Immediately, these poor brothers, I mean, I feel sorry and I don't feel sorry, but there's such favoritism, that it just has to affect you. And again, he's doing the exact same thing, but he is giving them, so people will see as they return to Canaan, they're going to be wearing these beautiful, colorful clothes in these royal wagons, making this procession from Egypt all the way back to, where were they living? They were living in Hebron. Shem, Hebron right there. So they're all going back. And to his father, he sent 10 donkeys carrying the best of Egypt, 10 he donkeys carrying the best of Egypt, and 10 she donkeys carrying grain, bread, and food for his father. Okay, now this is another really interesting thing. I love studying, commentary because I learn things that I didn't even know. All right, who hasn't read? Oh, Lisa, is your hand up because your student's thing is up? Okay, Lisa, do you want to read this?
Sure.
24. Just
Yes.
24.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. I need to make it a little bigger because my eyes and I'm just not sure how to
Okay.
do that. Okay, 24. And he sent off his brothers and they went and he said to them, do not quarrel on the way.
Okay. About what? About what? That's an interesting thing to say.
I know.
About getting more disproportionate quantities.
Okay, that's one thing. Any other things? What else could they don't quarrel about?
The money, the clothes, everything, and all the stuff that they were given, not to fight over it.
Okay, what else? Anything else?
About
Where they're going, the directions they're going in.
Okay, maybe. Well, they know
Their
where they're
reaction
going.
to Joseph,
What?
their reaction to Joseph, what they think of the situation.
Well, yes, I read a commentary saying, don't quarrel about whose fault it is.
Right.
Like you were the one who sold him. Well, you were the one who threw him in the pit. Well, you were the one. So he's saying, don't quarrel about that. Don't quarrel about status. Exactly. Don't quarrel about what you're going to get when you come back. So I think it's interesting that his last thing that he says is, don't fight on your way home. Just come back. But he knew them and human nature to start, accusing each other and pointing the finger and creating stress and differences among them because he's looking for some kind of peace. Now, the next thing that happens that they may have been quarreling about, and this is so interesting, and women in my women's Torah study know this, you others don't. Who's going to tell Jacob the news? This is another thing to argue. Well, you tell him. I'm not going to tell him. I mean, we didn't kill him. He didn't die. We knew. Who's going to tell him? And according to the Midrash, none of them told him. It says, and they told him, but the Midrash says that Asher, which was one of the brothers, had a daughter named Serach, which we studied about in Women's Torah Study because she's like a mystical character. And she's the only daughter mentioned when they go back to Egypt, when they mention all the different names of who's who and who went back, they say Serach, daughter of Asher. And Serach, they went to her. She was Jacob's favorite granddaughter, and she had a beautiful voice. And according to Rashi in the Midrash, they said, okay, sing it to him because we don't want him to have a heart attack. So Sarah came in and she sang, your son Joseph is still alive. He is, the Pharaoh's.
Oh my God.
And he said, what? Sing it again. And so she sang it, and that's how he learned the news. Now, what's so fantastic about Sarah, I'll just say, is that she is listed as one of the 70 people who entered the land of Canaan, entered Egypt, left Canaan with the whole family and entered Egypt. And at the end of the book of Numbers, which is 400 years later, when they talk about the people entering the land of Israel, when they come back, she's also listed. Her name is there again, Sarah, daughter of Asher. So it's like the rabbis went crazy, like, how could this be that Sarah
But she's
lived
a singer.
400 years, and they said she lived 400 years. She had mystical powers. She was an advisor, and she gave advice to the whole time in Egypt, and that she
Oh,
lived
wow.
all this time. So
The singer.
the singer, she was a singer and a wise woman, and ultimately, when they were
Wow.
going back to the land of Egypt, going back to the land of Canaan after 400 years after in the Exodus, Joseph, when he died, had made, everybody swear, when you go back, bring my body. But nobody knew where his body was except Sarah, because she had been there 400 years earlier and knew. And she said he was put in a metal or cement casket and thrown into the middle of the Nile. Why? Because the Pharaoh believed Joseph brought good luck to the land of Egypt, and he didn't want him to leave. So they threw him in the middle of the Nile. So Moses went to the banks of the Nile and said, because she told Moses, that's where he is. Because they said, we don't know, let's ask Sarah. I love these stories. And Moses came, this is all in the Midrash, and maybe it's even in Rashi. Moses stands at the bank and he says, Joseph, we're going back home. If you want to come, you have to appear now or we're leaving you. And the casket popped up.
Whoa.
From the bottom of the river, and they took his bones.
Oh my goodness.
So wonderful. I love it. Okay, so so much fun. Okay, so let me go back, because there's certain interesting parts of the story that you don't really pay attention to. So they went, and it says they told him Joseph is alive, but they didn't. In the Midrash, they didn't tell him. And that he ruled over the entire land. And when he saw it all, his spirits arrived. And then Israel, suddenly he's Israel. Isn't that interesting? It's like, what? He was, I don't know why this is happening. Forget this, stop this. I don't know why this footer is happening. All right, hold on. Okay. Close footer. Okay. So, it's like now he feels like Israel again, or blessed or whatever, because my son Joseph is alive and I will go and see him before I die. Okay. And then he has another one of those. I mean, this guy has so many chances, more than any other patriarch, that God constantly talks to him, and Israel and all that he go, and then God came to him in a vision. So who wants to read the vision? Who hasn't read? Ben, why don't you read?
Thank you. And God said to Israel in visions of the night, and he said, Jacob, Jacob, and he said, here I am.
So wait, I don't have an answer. God said to Israel, and then he calls him Jacob. So, I wrote a midrash about, a rabbi's, message about this idea, which I don't know, I like the idea that we're all Israel and we're all Jacob, and Jacob is the flawed, self-involved person, and Israel is the one who wrestles with himself to do the right thing. So I don't know, but it's just curious. In the same sentence, he has two different names. Continue, Ben.
And he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid of going down to Egypt, and there I will make you into a great nation. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up, and Joseph will place his hand on your eyes.
So, the Torah is written over and over and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. And so, unless you believe it came from Sinai directly, which I don't, and if you do, I respect that. But sometimes, different writers added things after the fact. So this idea that, you will come out, perhaps was written, these little messages from God sort of foretell what's going to happen. And it may be after the fact of the story of, the Exodus that they went back and put that in. We don't know. There were multiple writers, and it happened through the whole Hebrew Bible that, writers and scholars and scribes, for whatever their reasons, wanted to perpetuate a certain message toward us in our history. And so they added things to make it more clear. So this feels like one of those ads, something that was an addition. Okay, so they all went, and his daughters and his son daughters and blah, blah, blah. And then there's a list, but I didn't put them. Okay, so there's a list. So then I'm gonna okay, so now this is really interesting, and it's a good way to complete this hour. Sorry. Okay. All right, just a second. I'm teaching. I'll call you back in 15. Bye. Okay. Only for my daughter do I answer. Wait, hold on. Wait, why is it so big now? What happened? No, it's too big. I don't know. I did this mistake. This is weird. Sorry.
Looks like it's 20 point up at the top.
Yeah, but it's bigger than 20 point. This is like 50 point or something. Let me go down. Let's try 16. Ay. It's not going down at all.
Oh,
What's
wow.
happening?
So 14, it's a little smaller, but it's
All
still
right,
big.
something's so weird. I don't know what happened. I hate computers. We all need
Oh,
our
I know what it is. It's the magnification at the lower right. There's a little slide thing at the
Oh,
very
yeah.
bottom. Slide that over. You see that bar? You have to
Yes,
kind
I
of
do. Thank you.
There you
You're
go.
welcome.
Okay. Okay. Hold on. So they went. And okay, so I was just trying to make this bigger. Just this part. It's amazing, these computers. Okay, now. All right, so there's two things that I wanted you to say. Okay, well, so he sent Judah ahead of him. All right, 29. And Israel says it's Israel, Jacob, Israel, I will die this time since I have seen your face and stew alive. Okay, now this is really interesting and weird. I love when it's weird. Okay, so who hasn't read? Kimberly, do you want to read? No. Okay. Donna, do you want to read?
Yeah, where are we? I'm
And
kind of.
Joseph, here. And it comes to pass. Okay,
Yeah.
here. Wait, 31.
Okay, all right, I see. Okay. And Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, okay, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, the men are shepherds, where they were always owners of livestock and their flocks and their cattle, all they have bought. And it comes to pass that Pharaoh calls you and asks, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been owners of livestock from your youth until now, but we and our ancestors, so that we may dwell in the land of Goshen, because all shepherds are born to the Egyptians.
Okay, so he says,
Yeah.
don't tell them you're shepherds, because the Egyptians hate shepherds, which is interesting. Say you're livestock owners, which is like cattle ranchers, I guess. Cattle, you're not shepherds, you're cattlemen. Yes, Penina.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you know that the desert close to Egypt had Bedouin in it all the way back then. And
Right.
they had also camels. The camels and the Bedouin at the time were kind of like of aristocracy. And eventually when Abraham went down to the desert, they became native of the place, but he was also loved by his neighbors, the non-Jewish people. And he was treated as royalty. That's why they gave him the cave to bury the bones of his wife and himself and his wife later. And he also had the same stocks that the way the Bedouin had, because they would live there. They were moving, opening wells and stuff. So they had camels also. They were considered to be royalty. Like I said before, now he's bringing down his family there. And eventually you see that they would be put away in a different place in Egypt, in their own area. So first of all, we have here the Egyptian believe they worship the dead. So that's explained what happened with the bones of Joseph.
Yeah, but let's talk
And-
about the shepherds. Why-
Right. And now they're coming here and they're bringing whatever they have, but he's still going to keep them separately. The idea is that who is going to be now the master of what's going to be happening in Egypt? Who is going to be in charge? Who is going to be the authority? And also, who is going to continue with the belief, the religious belief of the people of Egypt? They were separate, and they were also allowed to worship their own God.
Right,
This is
but
very important
I
here.
understand that, but that's not what I'm asking. It's because here's the point. They say, don't tell them you're shepherds because they hate shepherds. Wait a minute. Let me just finish what happens. And so Joseph came and told Pharaoh, my father and my brothers and their flocks and their cattle, all that are theirs, have come to Canaan. And from among his brothers, he took 5 men, he presented them before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, what is your occupation? And they said, we are shepherds. So here's something interesting. Joseph says, whatever you do, don't say you're shepherds. And he takes 5 of the brothers and they say, Pharaoh says, and they say, we're shepherds.
Okay. He
So-
doesn't want the competition. He doesn't want anybody to compete with whatever it is that Pharaoh is in charge of.
Yeah, but I think there's more to it. That's interesting politically, perhaps, but psychologically, what does this say about Joseph's and their brothers and their relationship at this point, after all of this? That they, Susan.
Yes, I think we're talking about the strength of the assimilation, because Joseph was assimilated. So he always believed in God and said God is going to help. But look at, he was dressed as an Egyptian. He married Potiphar's daughter.
Right.
And he was at Pharaoh's court. He had courtiers that were all Egyptian. So a certain amount of assimilation he had, even though he kept his belief. The brothers were like either clueless or they saw themselves as Jewish, and this is what we did. as
Exactly,
Jewish.
another dynasty. Exactly.
Another dynasty. And I think it's been pointed out similarities now too with Moses, who was Egyptian and also led the Jewish people. I've seen that read, and that
He started the religion, absolutely.
yeah, that he could straddle both worlds in that. And so I think that's was an interesting comparison, and I think that's the issue.
I also think it's interesting that it's like, don't do it, and they do it. It's like, we're not listening to you, even though, it's like, you're still our little brother and don't tell us what to do, or we're not going to become Egyptified, as Penina said. We're not going to become Egyptian. We have a tradition of being shepherds, and we're going to say we're shepherds.
Right.
And
Because
maybe-
actually the shepherds are the one who started monotheism.
yes,
According to the archaeologists, they said that they slept under the stars and they had a chance to admire creation. And the first one who said that there is a higher power than God, than how do you call it, stone gods or wood gods or whatever it is. They're the one who decided that there's got to be a greater force than that. And that's where, although I think that's monotheism started, actually.
oh, maybe. Okay.
From the shepherds.
Lisa. You're muted.
Mike, the button. Anyway, this is just a side thing, and it's too much to get into at the end of our hour, but it just made me think of, later, for example, in Europe. Well, it's true of all Jewish history, but I think of it in terms of Eastern Europe, Jews that the concept of assimilation, are we Germans or are we Jews? And, or are we Hungarians, or are we Jews, or are we both? And as we know, before World War II, most of the German Jews, they would say, a lot of them would say they were German first, you know, and not the people in the shtetls, but in the cities.
Right.
And
There were no
all of that
shtetls
is-
in
all of
Germany.
that is- all of that assimilation that went on of trying to be part of the dominant culture, and yet they were something else. So again, it's just sort of a tangent that made me think of that difficulty that was set up for us, obviously very, very early, because sure, it would be easier to just stay the shepherd, but the shepherds have to be involved with all of the other farmers. You know what I mean? Kind of as a metaphor. So it's just a thought.
Well, it's also
I agree.
also, it's interesting that, you know, one of the reasons that God blessed the Hebrew slaves is that they kept their Hebrew names for all those years. They never went and became, it took Egyptian names. They kept their Hebrew names. They kept their language and perhaps their beliefs as much as they, you know, had them after 400 years. So I think it's interesting that as benevolent and generous and forgiving as Joseph was, he had lost maybe some of his identity after living in Egypt for all that time. And his brothers said, no, you know, this is who we are, and this is who will stay.
He named his sons Hebrew names.
Yes, he did. And by the way, that's true. I'm going to close on this. You may notice when we bless our children on Shabbat, we say to our daughters, may you be like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And what we say to our sons is, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. And Ephraim and Manasseh were the names of Joseph's sons.
Right.
And they ask, why do you say to these sons these obscure names that most people don't even know? And the reason is because those were the first brothers that didn't fight in our whole lineage, starting with Cain and Abel all the way down. They were the first brothers who got along, it's apparently. And so that's why we say you should be like them, none of the others. So I want to wish you Happy New Year.
Happy New
Lots
Year.
of love.
Thank you.
You
Great
too,
to
everybody.
meet you.
Happy New Year,
Happy
everybody.
New Year.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you next year, everybody.
And Shabbat
Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Good
Shalom.
Shabbos.
Bye, Shabbat Shalom. Love
Shabbos.
you.
Bye.
Okay, so I'm leaving the meeting.